This is Legal Edge 6. Get ready to immerse yourself in real world law enforcement challenges and evidence based solutions. You belong here, the command center where instructors and supervisors turn the page to expert insights that drive trust and performance in the organizational culture.
The next voice you will hear is fearless and focused, holding you up to your greatness, not your limitations. The mindset shift begins right now.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the kickoff episode of Legal Ed 6, the command center for law enforcement professionals just like you, who are done tolerating mediocrity and ready to lead with more clarity, courage, and purpose. I'm Charles Rambo, the Chief Development Officer at Rambo Solutions, LLC, and your host here at Legal Ed 6. You might have caught me on CNN, France 24, or local news stations. Maybe you've heard my voice dissecting the anatomy of policing on different podcasts. But this is totally different. This is where the tough love conversations are no longer optional, but a tactical transformation to preparing a new generation of leaders just like you to lead the profession better than where we found it. So why launch Legal Ed 6? Because over the years, after training thousands of instructors, supervisors, and command staff, both stateside and across the globe, I realized something powerful. They weren't just quoting my lessons, they were living them. And to be honest, the greatest push didn't come from accolades. It came from the late night DMs, the texts and the inboxes saying, "Rambo, you helped me to find my voice in navigating the legalities of our profession." That's why we're here, not for followers, because leadership is not a rank. This is a podcast for those who want insights that puts them 6 thoughts and 6 steps ahead of the challenges. And let me be very real in this podcast. I'm not here to play it safe, because here's the issue that I keep running into. Most law enforcement leaders, seasoned or new, don't know the impact of their own leadership style in the agency. And this is very critical in the law enforcement profession, particularly is because oftentimes you have no idea of how you lead, and your leadership style is the cause and effect of how and why people behave the way that they do in executing organizational goals. That's why I've been known local and global for having a tough love approach to teaching, because I believe in holding you up to your greatness and not your limitations. After each episode that you hear forward, I want it to be known that wherever your leadership is present, everything in that environment is going to change. That's why I am a raving fan of Dr. Loretta Melandro. In one of her most powerful quotes from her book called Fearless Leadership. And here it is. Nothing changes in the organization until leaders first transform themselves. Translation, your workforce isn't just a department. It's your alter ego, especially in a sheriff's office where the mindset of the person in charge now becomes what you see in the organizational culture. I'll say it again. That where the mindset of the person is in charge, it is what you can now see in the organizational success and failures of how they carry out operations. That's the realization that I came to in developing curriculum and organizational policing strategies. The You Get What You Tolerate series, accredited training designed to sharpen the edge of instructors, FTOs, supervisors, and command level leaders like you in 6 courses who are ready to confront the hard truths in building high trust and performance-based teams. And in today's 21st century law enforcement environment, this will require rewiring of leadership with the processes of neuroscience. Now, before we launch in today's episode and bring on our expert guests, I want to lay down the ground rules for engaging in the command center. This podcast is for education and research purposes only. Before applying anything that you hear, please, if you have questions, consult a person with more expert insight or your legal counsel. And I'm not saying ain't because I can't say isn't, but this ain't a safe place for keyboard warriors. We build here, we don't dumb down. So in your honor, please go ahead and accept your award for having a million ideas and comments for what we should be doing and being laid to rest next to someone who never accomplished anything. We're not click chasing. We're not here to entertain. We're here to elevate. If you find value in an episode, please don't just like it, live it. Share it with someone who still gives a damn about this profession. When you hear this cool sounding notification, that's your signal to download a featured professional manual. Scan the QR code. It's 100% free. No strings, no sales pitches. And last, because we are very transparent, the insights that we share in this podcast are free. But for those who want to go deeper, there is an optional link on our criminaljusticelearning.online website where you can enroll in our post-accredited 4-hour courses. So go ahead, scan the QR code right now and grab this manual, In Charge of Change, and open your neurons to receive new information. Today's launch series is called In Charge of Change because if you are leading people without knowing who you are not leading, you are guessing. And that's a very dangerous position to be in when critical decisions depend upon competent action that wires and fires together. Joining me now is Mr. Charlie Safford. I am honored to have Charlie online with me today. We served together on a mental health law enforcement collaboration called the Transformational Leadership Collaboration. And he is joining us today to talk about the dynamics of neuroscience and its application in law enforcement. Charlie, good evening. Thank you for joining us.
Nice to be with you.
Thank you. So, if you would give us a brief summary overview about your professional experience, expertise in neuroscience, and how do you see that working in law enforcement?
I am the president of YourCEUs.com. It's a national and international company that provides continuing education to mental health clinicians. For the past 15 years, I've been studying the whole arena of neuroscience. It has direct applicability for people in the mental health field as it does for people in the law enforcement field, because at its heart, neuroscience is about understanding human behavior and human motivation. And human behavior and human motivation are things that both people in your field and people in my field have to come to terms with in order for us to work effectively. Now, in terms of law enforcement and law enforcement leadership, it's my understanding that if you want to lead people, it's a really good idea to understand human behavior and human motivation. People come into this world basically self-interested and self-focused. And it's what we return to under conditions where certain goals and purposes, like survival, are under threat. And police officers certainly face those kinds of challenges. So keeping people motivated to stay focused on what I view as a very important mission, which is public safety, when it means putting aside one's own personal goals and purposes, that's one of the real challenges of leadership. So understanding what motivates people, what causes people to be influenced in ways that are constructive for staying aligned with the mission, those things I think are very valuable coming from neuroscience to put in the hands of our police leaders so that they can be more effective at shaping the behaviors and the motivations of the people who are under their watch.
So transitioning into your last introduction about neuroscience, how is that any different than what we're learning today in crisis intervention? That class is taught all across America, good training, but where do you see neuroscience either complementing it? Is it an upgrade? Is it about the same?
I think it's probably very similar to what you guys receive as part of that training in reducing the level of intensity of situations. And it's just, I think, understanding it at a somewhat deeper level and understanding that to begin with, reducing the level of intensity of any situation begins with preparing yourself and managing yourself so that there's not signals coming from you that pour more gasoline on the fire. So when we talk about the science of human behavior and human motivation, and we talk about the fact that people begin that process from a self-interested perspective, it's being able to control oneself enough that you can get a handle on the situation where there's crisis occurring. Because what you're trying to do is you're trying to de-escalate, understanding yourself well enough to know what signals you can give that will de-escalate, and understanding the other person well enough to know what kinds of motivations they need to bring the level of intensity down. Now, along those lines, there come certain things that are not just average people doing average things. There are special populations of people that have a particularly hard time de-escalating. And neuroscience also helps police officers to understand those people better, people who have, for instance, bipolar disorder and who are in a manic phase. And the de-escalation is more complex because of what's going on there. Or people who are under the influence of substances that make it harder for de-escalation. All of these things fall under the general topic of brain science and what's going on in terms of motivation for people to move from a position that's not working out so well to a position that's going to be more conducive to public safety. So it's probably very similar to what is already being taught, but just with additional tools, additional understandings at a somewhat deeper level.
And we're talking about basically neuroscience and its application, not just in dealing with persons who may have mental illness, what have you, but more or less how this is a important function with inside of organizations. At this time, I want you guys to go ahead and at least download the free manual to follow later on in this discussion, because at the end of the day, wherever your leadership is present, everything in that environment begins to change. And that's why we've entitled this particular manual, In Charge of Change. And we're getting some perspectives again from Mr. Charlie Safford. Listen, I want to ask you, let's unpack as we segue into executive function. If I said executive function, people would think we're just talking about a roundtable meeting. But what does executive function from a neuroscience perspective have to do with the brain process, frontline supervisors and command staff that have to navigate high stakes decision making as well as working inside of toxic organizational climates? Unpack executive function for us.
Sure. Executive function is really our highest order self-management and self-control skills. It's one of the last things that develop in people. There's been some science that says the physical equipment for good executive control isn't even done with its physical development until about age 25. And then it's continuously refined and reaches its peak at somewhere around the age of 61. So it's one of the things that separates us from all the other creatures on the planet. We, of all the creatures, are capable of concrete and complex thought. And in order to utilize our best thinking skills, our skills that figure out the best solutions to things, one of the first things we have to do is calm down all of the other things that's going on in our body and our brain. That would be emotions, drives, instincts, responses, reactions, etc. The equipment for doing that is the equipment that's responsible for executive function. All the things that are involving self-control, behavioral control, emotional control, starting tasks, stopping tasks in the middle of tasks, switching from one task to another, all of that stuff requires that these pieces of equipment that are falling under the rubric of executive function are operating well. And they're pretty much like mental muscles. They need to be exercised and developed for them to be utilized.
I mean, you were talking about something that sounds very complex. Is this something that automatically kicks into place when you understand its purpose and place, or do you have to rewire your brain? Charlie, this sounds a little complicated for the average mind. How do you think that transitions once the person gets a handle on this type of training?
Well, executive function requires that you exercise those muscles. One of the pieces of executive function is actually understanding how those muscles work. There's a big fancy word for that, or two big fancy words. One is called metacognition, which is understanding the way we think and understanding the way we learn. The other big term is called mentalization, which is understanding how our emotional or affective equipment works in terms of trying to reach our goals and objectives. If you understand those two things, if you understand how you think and how you learn and how your own emotional equipment works, that gives you a leg up in terms of having that kind of self-management and self-control that's necessary for being a leader. If you're going to be a leader, you're going to have to be able to manage yourself and present yourself in ways that create influence, that create authority, that create a willingness on the part of your subordinates to move in the direction that you would like them to move. And if you have good executive function and you can use your equipment effectively to use your best thinking skills, you're going to have a much easier time having that kind of leadership present in your organization, even when you're dealing with some of the unhealthy things that can creep into organizations from time to time.
And Charlie, listen, at the end of the day, I want my listening audience to understand I was not trying to trip him up on that question, but again, many of us have been taught so much, again, at a very basic level that we have not had the cognition to be prepared to expand our mindsets to a whole different level. I'm being authentic and upfront inside of this podcast is that I'm tired of the 10th grade level that we have been taught, particularly people who carry guns for a living. So when we hear from experts like yourself that come in and give us how we can expand our mindset in order to deal with issues in the field and inside of the organization more effectively, I want us to listen up carefully so that we'll know how to flex those muscles and strengthen them. We go to the gym, we practice muscle memory with pulling the trigger, but we've got to now start exercising more neurons in our brain cells. Listen, Charlie, you have taught me in many sessions in our TLC collaboration that there are different styles of authority. And you were pretty much hinting over into the next question. How does expert authority influence leadership, the leadership gap in 21st century policing?
Well, again, it comes back to how do we influence human motivation? And humans, as noted, tend to start out their life being self-interested and self-focused. They want what they want. One of the few things that can influence people to move in the direction that honors the mission is the use of professional authority. And professional authority basically has four different pillars attached to it. The first pillar, of course, is what's called structural authority, which is authority by rank or positions. Captains get to tell sergeants what to do. That's structural authority. They're higher rank. That means they have more of that structural authority to work with. But clearly, you know that there are people who are higher rank who don't maintain all of the other pieces of authority because they misuse the structural authority as if that gives them the leg up to do whatever they want to do for their own self-interested purposes. There are three other pillars that are important to be aware of. The first is something called moral authority, which is doing the right thing for the right reasons. That influences people. People are inspired by people who have good moral authority. And being inspired, they are willing to put aside self-interest enough to align with what the mission is. If the mission is a good one, it will pull people along with it. Now, there's also something called sapiential authority, which is from a Latin word for wisdom. And that is authority by knowledge, by knowing what to do and how to do it. And people do respond to that. If you have a big CEO of a company and he's having trouble with his computer, he's likely to call in the tech guy. And maybe the tech guy is way down on the ladder. But if he knows how to get that computer running, the CEO is going to listen to the higher level of wisdom or knowledge coming from that very low level tech guy. That's sapiential knowledge. The final one is personal or charismatic authority, which is to say authority by presence, assertiveness, force of personality, and that has influence with people. If you see somebody who's very confident, very assertive, And they also have all the other pieces of this professional authority. They can be very persuasive and very influential in asking people to change. Those are the great leaders. The great leaders have all four of those pillars working for them when it comes to authority. They have the structural authority, they have the authority of doing the right thing for the right reasons. They know what they're doing in a very powerful way, and they're very forceful about pushing that idea to people. That is what makes a great leader.
Well, Charlie, last week there was an incident in Cincinnati. I don't want to go into the totality of it because I still have not seen all of the evidence of what happened there. But it does involve a young man who was shot in a officer-involved shooting. And then the father allegedly retaliated by running over a sheriff's deputy, and that has made the news, particularly in the courtroom scenario of where he was in his first appearance. But something else happened inside of that courtroom that very few people are paying attention to, and it ties over into this whole process of neuroscience and police and citizen interactions. We're not going to play the fault game and who should have did what have you. We just want to look at this, and I want you from your neuroscience perspective, your expertise, to tell us how this situation played out. Looks like the young lady may have taken a course, even neuroscience or even inside of crisis intervention. But I want you to break it down after we show this video. Okay, Charlie, we've watched this video. As viewers who also viewed this confrontation, what should law enforcement leaders understand about neuroscience, decision making, and also dealing with emotional overloads on both sides here? Tell us your perspective.
What I see happening in this is something that leads into one of those important pieces of information that I think would be helpful for police officers to understand. There's something called the Yerkes-Dodson effect, which is to say, when we get excited or overstimulated by something, we tend to move into situations of fight, flight, or freeze. And that's one of the things that leads to escalation. And you can see in the clip, the gentleman who is getting increasingly activated, overexcited, is having a hard time with his own self-management. That's because he's moving into a position where it's a fight instinct. What the police officers around this person are first doing is they're experiencing something called contagion. Because we as human beings are designed to work socially and to understand each other in deep ways, if there are strong feelings present, those feelings almost get spread from person to person, like a disease, like a contagious disease, a cold or the flu. And you can see other people beginning to get a little bit overstimulated and over-aroused and begin to lose the capacity for maintaining self-control and self-management. What you see towards the end is one individual, and not necessarily the leader, but one individual, this woman, this police officer, female police officer, who's able to get control of herself using her executive functions, begin to assess the situation correctly, and begin to formulate an understanding about what this person needs to de-escalate the situation. And she's able to reach that person, and through her own calm and contagion from calm to excited, begin to help this person to calm down a little bit and bring the situation under control. So she did not have necessarily the structural authority to supersede what other people in the room were doing, but she had the sapiential authority, the authority by wisdom or knowledge to know what it's going to take to bring the situation under control. And getting herself managed first, getting herself at a good place first, understanding that she needed to be on the right side of that fight, flight, freeze tendency to a place where she could evaluate, assess, and do the right things, the right behaviors to help this person get under control.
So if that deputy or deputies who were involved in that incident are listening, or anyone has access to them, tell them we would love to have them on Legal Ed 6, not only to commend them, but for them to even come on and to share on this platform a best practice, because you all definitely did the job. I think what Charlie even brought out even more, it didn't require for a chief, a sheriff, a sergeant, or a lieutenant. Her leadership presence changed everything that otherwise that incident could have gone into a whole different direction. So again, here are some processes that we're talking about that are very applicable in how to bring situations under control with a whole different brain science. Last but not least, Charlie, in my experience in law enforcement, having managed operations from the academy to field operations on the floor or what have you, I believe that today we're experiencing a retention problem all across the United States, and it has very little, in my opinion. And here's where I'm going to allow you to correct me with the right knowledge. I believe the retention problem we're having is not due to pay, not promotions, but we're experiencing today have to do more with a level of toxicity inside of organizational cultures, behaviors banned in principle but tolerated in practice. How do you see neuroscience for leaders working through human resources processes to bring back healthier organizations where people want to come work and thrive and be there for the long term?
Well, again, this comes back to the whole issue of great leaders. And great leaders have those four pillars of authority we've discussed. The most important being here, moral authority. If you're going to be a great leader, you need to lead through the mission. Unfortunately, because we start out life self-interested, and because as a leader, you can put yourself in a position of power where you can look for your goals and your purposes at the expense of other people, I think that can lead into the possibility of more toxic work environments. The point of a great leader is to create great followers. And you can't do that if you are looking out for yourself and looking for your own interests and really enjoying having the power that you get through that structural authority. So it's really about encouraging leaders who want to be great leaders to be on the lookout for those individuals in an organization who are looking to acquire resources for themselves instead of looking to pursue a mission that is important and purposeful. And if you can get to that and create a good enough set of incentives for people to stay attuned to the mission, and then encourage peer relationships to put pressure on people to stay focused on the mission, you're able to turn some toxic work environments into environments where people feel supported and they feel encouraged and they feel like they're inspired to do what the job entails. But it requires really good leaders to be able to do that. And it also requires really good followers to be able to do that.
Charlie Safford, I want to thank you this evening. Well, you're out there on the West Coast, but thank you for tuning in with us. I am looking forward to launching the bigger purpose and mission under our TLC organization. Ladies and gentlemen, we have some exciting training that goes above and beyond what we're talking about today. Ladies and gentlemen, here's an ally in law enforcement, Mr. Charlie Safford. Again, Charlie, thank you for taking the time to join this important conversation.
Very welcome. And this was a really good thing to do. And I wish you nothing but the best with your podcast. And hopefully we can get this understanding out there.
Thank you again, Charlie. Before we wrap up today's episode of Legal Ed 6, I want to leave you with something deeper than what you just heard in the conversation. You heard today how neuroscience reveals what's happening behind the badge and behind the behavior. When leaders operate with clarity, purpose, or emotional regulation, things begin to change. And because awareness alone is not enough, that's why we created this manual, In Charge of Change, not as a textbook, but as a mirror to the leader that you are. The manual is tactical, reflective. It's designed to help you confront the most important battlefield that you will ever face, and that is in your mindset. This is important, particularly as what we've learned over the years and the great public demand for criminal justice reform. It's not in new policies, new gear, and training budgets. These tangibles won't mean a thing if leaders keep showing up with the same outdated mindsets and recycled habits. That's where In Charge of Change comes in. It asks the uncomfortable questions. Who are you really in the process of being a leader? What behaviors are you tolerating in your ranks because really you haven't addressed them with inside of yourself? And most importantly, are you really the kind of leader your agency needs right now? Again, I reflect upon the wisdom of Dr. Loretta Melandro when she stated it only takes one person to stand up and get the process started. So don't forget to take the practical exercise and retention of knowledge to build your leadership style from the inside out. That's what shifts toxic cultures. That's what earns trust. And that's how you stop being reactive and start being reformative. So here's my challenge. Don't just finish this podcast and go back to being business as usual. Download the manual, sit with it, tear it apart if you must, use it in your next supervisor's meeting, or bring it to your training academy. Reflect on it privately. Make it a tool that you can use to improve yourself and your teams. If today's conversation resonated with you, please be sure to join us in next week's episode on Comstat Analytics, how your expert authority and crystallized intelligence can help fight hybrid crime with data. Spoiler alert, your own leadership style and mindset that you learned in this episode is the biggest wild card in your crime-fighting strategy. Fearless and focused on evidence-based results. I am Charles Rambo, and I'll see you in the next episode in the Command Center.